It's Netflix's own number that they're assigning themselves. It has no independent auditing or, way you could test if it's true in reality. But I find it interesting that that's how Netflix is valuing that show. It gives us some insight into, what they want to emphasize and what they find valuable within their own properties.
Hey gang, it's Tuesday, November 2nd. Ross and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Tenuity. I'm Marcus. Today I'm joined by our senior analyst covering TV and video, is Ross Benish.
Hey Marcus.
Hey chap, thanks for hanging out. Today's fact: there is a hot pink lake in Australia. This is madness. Western Australia's Lake Hillier, Hillier, has a naturally occurring pink hue, which scientists aren't entirely sure why this is. We need to figure this out, okay, because it's freaking me out. But it's likely to do with the carotenoid pigments produced by microalgae in the water. I don't know what any of that means, but it freaks me out. Squid Game, I could handle. This, however, I'm really struggling to come to terms with. It's pink, Ross.
Do they allow people to swim in this lake?
I think you can, yeah. Well, I don't know about allow. I've seen people swimming in it. But I don't know if they're supposed to be there. It's a pink lake. You have to Google it. It's insane.
Probably wear goggles if I went in.
You've got to wear a lot of protective everything. It looks like Kool-Aid. Very cool. Anyway, today's real topic: Netflix's Q3 earnings. And of course, we'll talk a little Squid Game. No spoilers, though. Don't panic. All right, so we're talking Netflix today. With the earnings this quarter, we're doing a bit of a different format. We're going to be talking about the user highlights and the revenue highlights and also the other highlights, but we'll be talking about them by filling in some blanks. So Ross is going to fill in a couple of blank questions for us and then give us his takeaway as to why he thinks that. We'll talk a little Squid Game, of course, and then Q4. What do we expect from Netflix in terms of finishing out the year? In other news in the second half, as per usual. Let's start, Ross, with the user highlights for Netflix. Netflix subscribers reached 213 million in Q3, up 4 million from Q2. That's double the gains it saw last Q3 quarter on quarter. The US and Canada subscribers stayed at 74 million, ticking up a fraction, 700,000. So Ross, the user growth figures this quarter for Netflix were blank.
They were pretty solid. In the US and Canada, they're pretty flat, but that's expected at this point. They beat their estimates and they added over 2 million subscribers in the APAC region, the most of any region, and that's pretty impressive. Yeah, gains in APAC. Also EMEA surprised me. So strong gains there. It seems like it's kind of official at this point, isn't it, Ross? US and Canada subscribers have officially plateaued. We were at 74 million. More or less, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I don't think you're ever going to see them add even 1 million subscribers in that region during any quarter. It's always going to be a few 100,000. They might even lose some.
Yes, exactly. Yep, they might be going up or down a little bit. I mean, last quarter we did see them lose 400,000 or so. This quarter they went up 70,000, but not enough to move the needle. Pretty much they've been at 74 million in terms of US and Canada subscribers for Netflix. 74 million since last Q4, and there's 74 million today. So a little bit of up and down, but they pretty much stayed where they're at.
The only way that would change significantly is if they altered their password sharing policies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people like me who are getting it for free.
Shocking. Also, it was a really interesting number from Ampere. For the first time, 24 to 44-year-olds are now more likely to be Netflix subscribers, which I thought was interesting, than those 18 to 24, according to this new survey. So they're suggesting the Netflix audience is aging. Ross, the most interesting user figure this quarter for you was blank.
Well, the most interesting figure, I would go back to that APAC figure, just the fact that they continue to add over 2 million subscribers in another quarter. And that is also reflected in where they're adding content. They have a lot of Japanese, Indian, and Korean shows that are coming to the platform. They're spending much more money in those regions producing content, and that's paying off for them now. Yeah.
Let's put a grade on it. What have you got for the Netflix's user highlights?
I'd give it a B. It was pretty solid, but it's not like it blew me away.
Okay. Let's move to revenue. Some of the highlights there. The streaming giant made $7.4 billion in Q3, $1 billion more than it made last Q3, despite year-on-year growth slowing. Revenue from the US and Canada grew at the same pace as last Q3, 11 to 12%, and still accounts for just under half, 44% of all the money Netflix makes, coming from the US and Canada. Ross, the revenue growth figures this quarter for Netflix were blank.
I'd say pretty good. 7.5 billion-ish in revenue is better than most people's expectations were. So,
And how about the most interesting revenue figure this quarter was blank?
The most interesting revenue figure would come from what Bloomberg reported about Squid Game being worth around $900 million to Netflix. Now, that number is almost meaningless because it's Netflix's own number that they're assigning themselves. It has no independent auditing or way you could test if it's true in reality. But I find it interesting that that's how Netflix is valuing that show. It gives us some insight into, what they want to emphasize and what they find valuable within their own properties.
Yeah. That number blew me away, especially because apparently it cost $21 million to make Squid Game. That's 43 times less than it seems to be worth, the $900 million that Bloomberg reported.
And again, there's no independent auditing of how many people really viewed the show, how many people subscribed because of the show. This is all self-reported. But yes, it is interesting.
Yeah, so about how many people... So Netflix viewed Squid Game. So Netflix said 111 million people worldwide watched Netflix's original show Squid Game in the first 4 weeks, notes Megan Farrock-Manesh. There was also numbers about 140 million households, so a few numbers out there. So for folks who
those
don't...
are coming from Netflix, though.
Yes, yeah, they are. For those folks who don't know what the hell we're talking about, where have you been? But secondly, it's a South Korean-based survival show. Hundreds of players compete in elimination-style games for millions of dollars. Losing each game is less than ideal. Let's just say that. Miss Farrock Manesh, though, she was noting that dozens of Squid Game-inspired mini-games have taken over Roblox, with players making their own versions of the show's challenges. It's reminiscent of games like Danganronpa, apparently, in which students compete in a deadly killing game for their freedom. There's a lot. And also a more PG idea of Mario Party, apparently. Ross, we were talking about Squid Game. You said you'd seen it before me. I've just finished it. What do you make of the effect that that's had? Whether that could have possibly affected the Netflix user numbers and just the cultural impact that seems to have had?
Well, I don't think it affected the user numbers much because when Squid Game came out, it was towards the end of the quarter and it took a little bit for the viewership to pick up. It wasn't one of those shows that just blew up the day that it was released. Most of its viewership came in the subsequent weeks. So I think a lot of those viewer numbers would actually have a bigger impact on Q4.
Yeah, it had 2 weeks left, I think, in the quarter.
But it definitely had a cultural impact around the world, too. It's globally popular in a way that very few television shows have ever been.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out why did it do so well? There were two suggestions.
Because we're all twisted people.
That can't be, that probably is. It can't be the reason, but it probably is the reason. I mean, we were talking about things that it reminded us of, talking about Black Mirror, talking about The Hunger Games, talking about Battle Royale. I think it was 2001 Japanese film, I think that is. So we've had kind of hints of this type of show. Apparently, Squid Game was pitched 10 years ago, according to The Economist. But studios thought it was too bizarre, fair, and wouldn't make enough money, not fair. Foreign films, The Economist was noting, accounted for 20%. Foreign films accounted for 20% of North American releases, 2003 to 2017, so that 14-year stretch, but they only took in 1% of box office earnings. So there's definitely no guarantee that they're going to pay back. However, Ross, movies like Parasite, that won Best Picture in 2020, that could have paved the way for more openness towards foreign language films. And then the second point was being made in some of the literature for this was it's just less of a commitment to stream something. And if you like it, that's great, but you don't have to buy a movie ticket and commit to it. So it's easier for people to kind of test drive things.
Well, Netflix is producing hundreds, probably thousands of television shows every year. So when they're producing so many shows and they have such a large platform that has so many viewers around the world and they have a very successful content recommendation algorithm, they can generate hits. And it happened to be Squid Game this time, but it could be anything. It could come out of left field, I feel like they're primed to have these viral hits television shows just by the frequency with which they produce shows and the number of people who have access to that platform.
Right.
And it's global. It used to be hard to watch foreign films if you wanted to. There was more resistance. And now it's thrown right in front of you.
Yeah, the laws of probability do suggest that they're going to have one hit at some point, to your point, considering how much they're...
Like, who thought, like Tiger King was, like, so huge a year ago, and that's a pretty bizarre series as well. Not something that, like, 5-10 years ago you would predict would be, like, the most popular documentary ever. So
yeah, it's a fair point.
They just produce so much, and every once in a while, some bizarre thing they made catches fire.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how many spin-offs come from this, whether they're like American versions of this or other similarly kind of dystopian shows, whether it's a bit of a turning point in terms of the type of shows that we're creating.
And I don't think they expected this to be their biggest hit either, because there wasn't nearly as much marketing for the show leading up to it as you saw with like Bridgerton and Stranger Things and The Crown. They have a few of these shows where they're really, really trying to make them hits and they spend a ton of money. And Squid Game didn't seem to follow that route. It seemed like the users just happened to find this obscure Korean show and it just like took off.
Yeah. But yeah, you were saying to me before this recording a few days ago, you were like, what does it say about us that, that this many people tuned into a show about people basically giving up their lives for a big sum of money? I was surprised it hasn't been made sooner, but that also, I think, is quite telling about how I feel about society. Yeah,
there's always been content like this that's like bizarre and dystopian, but it's usually not as popular as this.
Over 100 million people is pretty impressive. So you think you mentioned revenue highlights. Circling back to Netflix for a second, you said revenue highlights was a B?
I got B+.
A B+, okay. And then, so yeah, B+ for that. You had, I think it was a B for user highlights. So overall, Netflix, you're giving them a B for their Q3?
Yeah, B.
Okay. Other highlights, was there anything else that jumped out to you with regards to their earnings?
Nothing like terribly, I mean, they're profitable this quarter, but that wasn't terribly surprising.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about, so Netflix was noting that they're going to change their public-facing metrics that it uses to rank the most popular titles.
Oh, yeah, go away from the 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So just to explain for folks, they typically rank their most popular titles as a streaming service. In the past, they've ranked their titles based on the completion of at least 2 minutes, as Ross just pointed out, of the film or TV show in the first 28 days on the service. More recently, though, Katie Keck of The Verge was noting, more recently the company has released rankings based on the total number of hours a movie or series is viewed, a metric they will shift to moving forward starting later this year. How wouldn't just longer shows have more viewing time and therefore go higher up?
Longer shows would have an advantage in this, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Longer movies would have an advantage.
That seems strange to me. That you might be an okay show, but it had 10 seasons versus an incredible, kind of blockbuster almost.
But if the show isn't that great, most people aren't going to finish watching it if it's really long and not engaging for them.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, I thought that was quite interesting as well to know. Q4, right before the Q3 Netflix earnings, BMO Capital Markets lowered their estimates for Q4 Netflix subscriber growth, now expecting 9 million new subscribers versus the analyst consensus projections of 10 million. Ross, how do you expect Netflix to finish out the year?
Basically, to continue what they've been doing the last few quarters, very few ads from US and Canada. You're going to see a lot from APAC and the EMEA region.
Mm-hmm. I've got to ask you, because it seems to be a question that keeps coming up and died down a little bit, but you see HBO Max ad-supported tier, you see Disney Plus ad-supported tier
Disney
coming.
Plus doesn't have an ad-supported tier.
We're talking about one.
Yeah, they've hinted that it might be a possibility, but...
Right, speculation. Netflix still not on the horizon for you, in your opinion?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no ads for Netflix.
Okay, that's what we've got time for the lead story. Time now for the halftime report. Ross, could you give us one takeaway from the Netflix earnings for Q3?
My takeaway was it was a solid but not spectacular quarter where they beat expectations for subscribers and revenues, but they didn't significantly exceed them.
All right, time for In Other News, but first a quick word from our sponsor, Tenuity. It's time to stop thinking about brand and performance separately. The funnel has collapsed. Brand and performance are now one. With top-notch marketing, you can go from awareness to click in a few seconds. That means you can sell as you brand and brand as you sell. Rethink performance with Tenuity, the largest independent performance marketing firm across streaming TV and the triopoly of Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Find out how at rethinkperformance.com. All right, folks, we are back today in other news. How inflated is TV and social media ad spending? And will we ever have a single linear and digital TV currency? Story 1. Ad spending on TV and social media is highly inflated in relation to daily consumption, according to analysis of ad spend forecasts of 100 worldwide markets by marketing intelligence company WARC and the results of an extensive GWI survey. The analysis found, 1, that in Q1 2021, social media attracted more investment from advertisers than linear TV for the first time. Number 2, both media draw more of ad budgets than the average consumer spends with these channels each day. For example, social media will account for 39% of 2022 ad spend, but has a 21% share of daily media consumption. 39% ad spend, 21% media consumption. Linear TV will account for 31% share of ad spend next year versus 16% share of daily media consumption. Ross, your thoughts?
It isn't as simple as comparing consumption to ad spend and saying that they should be equal. I saw several radio trade publications use this same study to say that there needs to be more money coming into radio and digital audio advertising because the share of time spent with those platforms is much lower than their share of ad spend. But consider the ads that are running on these platforms. In television, you're getting a video ad, so it's audio and it's visual and it's 30 seconds long delivered on a big screen. That's going to command more ad spending and higher prices than radio, where you're only listening to something as you're driving your car. You're only getting the audio aspect, not the visual. So anything that has a visual aspect, is particularly if it's in motion like video, is going to get a greater share of ad spending relative to its time spent. So I don't believe that social media or television is receiving too much ad spending. If they are, it's only slightly relative to their consumption due to the fact that their ad formats are more expensive and they engage more of your senses than others do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent point. It's there's a lot of nuance. Is a fair answer there. More so than just the simple equation of how much time people are spending on the platform versus how many dollars.
Well, if that's the case, yeah, you could say display ads deserve more money because we're all spending tons of time scrolling on our phones and computers. But display ads are just like little banners that you don't even pay attention to while you're reading an article, usually blocking them with an ad blocker.
Yep, a lot of folks. Story 2, media buyers want more standardization in linear and digital TV measurement, but a common currency is unlikely, writes Insider Intelligence analyst Nina Getson. A recent report from measurement company TV Squid notes that the definition of TV has fundamentally changed, with most media buyers in the US, UK, Germany, and Australia somewhat agreeing that TV refers to both linear and streaming. 86% agree somewhat that cross-platform TV measurement and attribution was a lead priority for their company or clients, Nina writes, but around 60%, fewer, but still quite a lot, said the accuracy of cross-platform measurement and attribution was one of the biggest challenges of converged TV advertising, suggesting a disconnect between what clients want and what TV companies offer. Nina says that while individual networks are making progress, NBC Universal's one platform, Discovery's one graph, etc., there's still room for improvement industry-wide with few standards for measurement and attribution across networks. Ross, what do you think?
I don't believe there will be a single currency in the streaming space. There may be multiple, and Nielsen will probably be one of them, but I don't believe it'll ever be consolidated to the point that streaming is equivalent to what we see in linear TV now, where one metric is dominant.
Why do you think that is?
It's too fragmented, and everyone kind of wants to do their own thing.
Mm-hmm. That's all we've got time for today's episode. Ross, thanks for hanging out.
No problem.
Thank you to Victoria. She edits the show. Thanks to everyone listening in. If you haven't seen Squid Game, no, maybe you shouldn't. It's very intense. Prepare yourself.
I enjoyed it a lot.
It was a lot. It was pretty good. See you tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers Daily. Hopefully, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Tenuity.